Hi, my name's Anthony or Tony Jackson. I'm with Oklahoma Child Support Services. We're here to talk a little bit about the Oklahoma Intergovernmental Case Processing Grant that was presented by OCSE and given to the state of Oklahoma's Child Support Program. I'm here with Christina Bolin. Christina.
Hello. As Tony mentions, I'm Christina Bolin, and I'm with Cherokee Nation Child Support, and I'm our Quality Assurance Specialist.
Okay. One of the roles that I have in Oklahoma Child Support is as one of the two major tribal intergovernmental liaisons between me and the 10 tribal child support programs in the state of Oklahoma. This grant actually will tell you involves 3 of those tribes. Next slide. Okay, I wanted to go through a little bit of background first to let you kind of have a feel for why Christina and I actually thought up this grant, mostly her, but I helped submit it, so I get to be on the video here. In Oklahoma, we have 11 child support programs inside the borders, so we're kind of have more child support programs than probably any other state. We have the state program, of course, and then we have 10 different tribal child support programs. And those 10 tribal programs actually serve 35 different federally recognized tribes. So we have a lot of tribal programs in our state. Some of those tribal child support programs actually use the state's child support case management system, our computer system, or a system for keeping track of cases and whatnot, but more than half of them do not. In this grant, we have kind of a special mix of 3 tribes that do not use the state program, so don't use the state case management system. So our interactions with them has been, until this grant, non-electronic, and meaning it's been verbal, but not necessarily, we don't have interfaces between the systems, and that's what this grant project was to build on. 2 of those tribes, the Modoc Nation and the Cherokee Nation, are actually using the federal model tribal system, or MTS, out there in the tribal world. And then one of the tribes was actually using their own created case management system to keep track of, and that's these case management systems, to keep track of their child support cases. Okay, give you an idea geographically. I love maps, and so I threw in a couple of maps here. That's the state of Oklahoma on the outside outline, and it shows every county in it. But the colored sections are some of the 39 tribes that reside within the boundaries of the state of Oklahoma. You can see the great big one called the Choctaw Nation. They're not in this grant. But the big green area to the top of the northeast corner of the state is the Cherokee Nation. The big blue that's contingent to it is the Muscogee Creek Nation. They're one of the tribes that are in this grant. And then the Modoc Nation is a very, very tiny nation inside the multicolored box way at the very, very top of the northeast corner. Anyway, but for tribes in Oklahoma, you can see they cover more than half the state. So it was important for us, for an intergovernmental grant project idea, to do our partners, the Tribal 40 programs. So I think this is you.
Yes. When we began, we originally went in with the state, and we were able to utilize their system and to track our cases. And so we were very intermingled in the cases. It was easy to tell when cases went on and off services because everything was connected. When we came out of OSIS and went into our own model tribal system, it presented a lot of problems and weekly meetings and lots of discussion for us in the state to try and resolve some of the problems we were seeing. Some of the issues that we had to address was clients going on and off TANA for foster care, different types of benefits. We would have a case open, they would have a case open, both sides would be enforcing. And so we had to troubleshoot and try to figure out, how are we going to handle this now that our 2,000 plus cases are out of the system, and we've got all this dual enforcement, and we're sending money in the wrong direction because it needs to be going to the state, because they're on TANF, or it needs to be going to the client because they come off TANF. And so we faced a lot of challenges there in the beginning. And that's really where we started to dig into getting into this grant, where the idea came from. The assigned balances, even with getting the money on, the benefits turned on and off and getting the money redirected, the balances were even off. So we had to really think about what elements were needed inside this grant to kind of resolve some of these problems to get the cases cleaned up a little bit. We even have seen like child welfare. We are reporting back and forth our services and our benefits. We're looking at those elements to send back to the state. So exchanging all of those elements inside this file has made it a more automated process instead of trying to coordinate manually every single week on what our cases were.
That made me think about a question we need to ask, maybe for the audience. I said that the Modoc Nation was a very tiny tribe, but they actually serve 15 different tribal child support tribes for their child support programs. And so their caseload is about 4,500 cases. How big is the Cherokee Nation? Do you remember? How many open cases? Yeah.
Our caseload, we're running about, I think the last count I looked at was 2,500. I have to double check, but approximately 2,500.
And then our third tribe, the Muscogee Creek, I think they're about 25, somewhere between 25 and 3,500 cases. So for this grant, there are 10,000 tribal child support cases being potentially conflicted with the state program, both conflicted on whether they're on state TANF or whether they're in state custody, or just because there's just a child support case. So we didn't need both 10,000 tribal child support cases for a set of families and 10,000 more of the same families having the same kind of case for the state program. So quite a bit of volume. I know in some states, the tribes are much bigger, but there's also some tribes that are much, much smaller. Mm-hmm. And for us, with 10 tribes, even with just this 3, we figured we could do a demonstration of how we could improve our electronic communication.
And we're so close. Like the clients were used to that seamless transition between the two offices. They'll go to the state and want services, and then they transfer their case to us, and then they have us for a couple of years, and then they go back to the state. And so there's that close relationship that we've always had. And so coming out into two systems created a big barrier between the programs.
And I think that's something else that's important, that made me think for persons that are eligible for tribal child support, it's really their choice who serves them. They can certainly always apply for state services or go on state TANF and have a mandatory referral on a mandatory state case, but they also can just elect to go to their tribe. Mm-hmm. or go to the tribe that serves their tribes, I should say, even. Mm-hmm. And have a tribal child support case, and it's purely the customer's request. So, and we try to honor that instead of trying to beat each other up about who gets the case. We try to just follow what the customers want.
Yes.
So, okay. All right, another one of my maps. This one actually came off I think this came off of our transportation department map, but it has in what I liked about this. It certainly is again showing the Cherokee and they call it the creek here, but that's the Muscogee Creek. But in that little pull out underneath the panhandle, that's the pull out from that northeastern corner, and it does show the Modoc. The Modoc is the smallest little square in that small little square, and yet they're one of our larger tribal child support programs because they serve so many of the other tribal citizens around the state.
I think something important to note on this too, Tony, is you have this map and it shows those regions, but citizens live all across the state. So even outside your highlighted areas, there are so many citizens that are still receiving services of some kind.
Well, yeah, even in that gray area up in the Panhandle in the Northwest, there are lots of tribal members up there. And sometimes they can get services from them, but generally, and it's not like, all the Chickasaws stay in their little square or all the Choctaws stay, they're all just Oklahomans, but they're all, a lot of them, people in Oklahoma also have a tribal affiliation or a tribal membership, and so they get choices. Anyway, I love maps, so just gives me a visual image. Okay. This one mine or yours? I think this one's mine. Okay, so the goals of our project when we were proposing it is, number one was we wanted to decrease or eradicate the duplication of child support cases. That 10,000 or so tribal program cases that we knew about, they don't need to be state cases at the same time. And the customers sure don't want to deal with 2 child support programs at the same time. So one of the goals was to be able to tell each other, we have these customers already in our caseload, or better yet, for the tribal side, is these people have just applied for tribal services. You don't need a state case any longer. And we wanted to do that quickly and seamlessly and hopefully electronically. And that's where we went. All right. The other thing from the state perspective, and this was me being greedy because I'm also in charge of special collections for our state, is that we wanted to improve the state's TANF and foster care recovery on appropriate tribal cases. We had always worked well with all the tribes about if a person was on state TANF or in state foster care, the kids were in state foster care, they have assigned their child support benefits. If one of the child support programs was collecting the money, that needed to be remitted or paid to the state. Reimbursement of the TANF or reimbursement of the 4E recovery collections. We hoped that by better communicating electronically when someone actually started on TANF, that we could start the remittance process, the distribution process of distributing the funds to the state TANF program or state foster care program. All right, and then from the opposite end of that, lots of the tribal customers would leave TANF or go on leave state TANF, or the kids would get back into their custody. And so from that moment forward, they were entitled to the current support collections and their proportionate share of arrears collections. A lot of times before, if the state didn't and the tribe did not know that they had left state TANF, we would still be applying collections to state TANF when they should have been distributing to tribal customers and their custodial parents to support those kids. So weren't getting the TANF and they weren't getting the child support. That was a huge bad problem that we all had. So, and we worked together with. So those were our major goals. Okay, next. All right. Yours.
This one's mine. So some really important outcomes for us, or products and outcomes, the electronic file. Tony talked about it being, some way to automate that a little bit to be able to exchange the data automatically. With the number of caseworkers and things that the tribes have to their caseload, and then depending on how they're processing and things like that, the amount of time that they have to review individual data is very limited. And so it's important that we can automate as much as possible, maybe not as much as the state system is automated, but at least some of those elements, so that we are not missing as much by having to go manually look something up and lacking the time to do so. So modified tribal child support system that will automatically receive and consume data when tribal case participants start or end state benefits and correctly distribute child support collections. So for us, our goal is really to get where the system that we're utilizing to house the data is able to consume that and use it. We're not quite there. We've designed the file to be able to be modified and utilized when we can work with the Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement to be able to modify model tribal system a little bit to be able to consume that data. So we laid out the foundation so that one day we'll be able to develop this into an even more automated system than we were able to achieve in the implementation of this particular project. New tribal caseload database within the state system, state child support system. And I'm going to let Tony address that one because they actually worked on that side of things. So, Tony?
Right. That's actually, so each month, we receive essentially an electronic file of all of the participants and the case information for the tribal child support programs. And with that, we can build a database in my state case management system that essentially tells me at any given time, these are the participants in a tribal child support case, and it's inside my state system. So when my case initiation program starts for any new case, we get a substantial number of cases from referrals from the TANF program or referrals from our Medicaid program called Sooner Care. And so a case builder, a case initiation specialist in the child support program might start out building that brand new case. One of the first steps is to try to check this tribal caseload database, and they can see, wait, that family already has a child support case. And before, what we were having to do is build the state case. We sent out automated letters to the customers who would then get them and go, what? Why do I have a new case with the state when I have an old case with the tribe? We can prevent that from ever happening. We can prevent the customer service disruption that would have happened every time we built a brand new case. We're tribal caseload members. Hey, it made me think about two. I want to go back to number two, though. I love the database that we've got in the system in my state system, but that model tribal system is now being used by, I don't know how many different tribes across the country. Last I heard, about 10 or 12 maybe. And certainly the federal office is wanting lots of other tribal child support programs to use the model tribal system, right? All right. And we built that system with some advice early on from the IT people for MTS, or model tribal system, about standards and consistency of data being transferred. And we actually built it so that when they're ready and can work on it, the data stream will fit right into the model tribal system. We use their definitions of what each piece of data means, in other words, right?
Yes, yes. And we utilized, even on the file that we've developed that we're exchanging back and forth, the elements that we've identified to be important to go between the two agencies. It will make it easier when OCSE is able to come in and get involved with model tribal system, for them to take each of those elements and import it into the system and then use it as a case management like work screen, so that the data coming in can be validated prior to accepting it into the system. So we had those conversations originally to kind of to base our foundation so that one day we can really shoot for that automation.
Well, and for me, it also means that some other tribe and some other state can take this same project if that tribe's using model tribal, or actually, I mean, we have one that's not model tribal, and integrate our process and not have to reinvent the wheel and look at the data elements that are needed and go, hey, we can do this too. We can do this between state X and tribe Y, and so it does become a grant project that can be expanded.
Correct.
And I think we figured out long ago that this was important information that we needed to share with each other.
Right. And it's built in a way that it works for us today, but it'll be even better as we grow and we're able to develop it further on.
Right. Good. All right. Evaluation plan. This was actually, in a way, this will be a hard part and an easy part for me, is we started with nothing. So this is a grant that had a huge black hole of information. We certainly weren't helping any customers on the conflict of cases. So the moment the database was built, it started helping us, not hurt customer relations between us and the customer and the customer and the tribe and all three of us. So, and then from the moment we actually had some collections for the state, that was our second goal, was improve the collections for TANF. We had some, but it was really kind of hit and miss. And it was almost accidental collections, if you ask me, is that some caseworker would notice somebody was on TANF, or some caseworker would also notice that the customer is no longer on TANF. So everything we got, none of it was recorded. It was lucky collections for the state. And then once this is fully implemented, there'll be a stream of payments on the appropriate cases and a release of payments when there's not appropriate state cases. So anyway, our hope, focus on the evaluation plan is really the improved customer service and then that timely distribution either to the state or to the family. And so since we're starting with zero, the first dollar we collect or the first dollar we distribute shows that we've successfully implemented our program here. Okay. Okay. This is just the sign-off slide, of course. If you have questions, the grant was actually awarded to the state, but we couldn't have done it without the 3 tribal child support programs. They're the Cherokee Nation, the Modoc Nation, and the Muscogee Creek Nation. So if you're a tribal person and you really want to contact them, let me know and I'll certainly put you in touch with them, or they'll be listed in documentation if you want to look at the documents for this grant. Thank you.
Thank you.